to help you manage this workplace transformation back to the workplace effectively, so that you can give not only the health and safety requirements from the business standpoint, but the confidence for the employees to utilize the locations and services effectively. So we'll be covering off various different items during today's session, with the overall outcome that we want to help you prepare your locations for readiness, that you have the tool sets available to manage and monitor resources within that location, what the workplace experience is like for the people there, so that you can track engagement and understand user perception of the changes that you're making to that environment, but also provide you with tool sets for the ongoing management and prevention of issues within those areas as well. These tool sets are based on Microsoft technologies. So if you're already a Microsoft 365 or Office 365 user, these things can be bolted on very quickly to enable this transition back to the workplace. Should you need to utilize the Power Platform, or if you're already using it for other reasons, then this is an even easier solution to implement on top of this. And we'll cover that off today in terms of what licensing you need, as well as how these applications integrate to the overall stack. So very quickly, in terms of what we do, Circle and Valto, we have partnered for the past 5 years on delivering digital transformation services for a lot of organizations. This has predominantly been on the Office 365 and now the Microsoft 365 stacks. And that has lent itself to delivering a lot of custom applications utilizing Power Apps, as well as transformation and training services around the Microsoft 365 services in addition to that. So on the call today, you have myself, I'm the Cloud Solutions Architect at Circle, and then we have Hugh Valentine, the CEO of Valto, who heads up that business.
Hi, Mark. Thank you.
Hi, mate. So what we're aiming to put together today is we'll try and set the scene as to what impact this has had to a lot of organizations. And what we're essentially looking at is the 3 phases that we've seen this have to a lot of organizations. And they're summarized in how do we respond, how do we recover, and then after the recovery, how do we reimagine the services that we're delivering across organizations. The first phase is simply responding to the immediate impact that we had through office closures, the need to cut costs and the like. In other words, it's the application of traditional crisis management methods, which many companies have already implemented. The second phase is kind of where we find ourselves now, and that's recovery, which is already underway in many places and would be more like a dial than a switch, suggesting that we have lots of movement on the dial back and forth to give people that flexibility to manage that recovery and how quickly they transition. This is the implementation of specific business resilience plans, which are subject to board review and which by their nature must be flexible and adaptive. But the third phase is both unique and notable. It calls for reimagining, a period in which innovation born of necessity during the previous 2 phases will emerge. And essentially, what that means for a lot of organizations now is that IT projects and how we manage those things going forward, particularly with the way back to work, needs a modern approach to deliver it. The opportunity to incorporate with company operations the efficiencies and shortcuts, ideas and designs developed out of necessity during the first 2 phases will mean that this reimagined phase opens up a whole new level of capability and functionality that we possibly haven't considered beforehand. So I just wanted to share with you kind of those 3 areas of items really that we kind of see as part of us helping organizations deal with this COVID-19 scenario that we find ourselves in, and we're very much into the recovery and reimagining phases now. So with that, I'll hand over to Hugh, who will run through now in more of a demonstration format the applications that Microsoft have released and how we can deploy them.
Thank you, Mark. I'll just jump over to share my screen. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, great. So you should be able to see my screen now. So obviously, as Mark mentioned, Microsoft have worked on a load of templates that are available. There's 3 key templates that are currently available that basically link together. And they're also working on a new one, which we'll cover off in a bit more detail at the end. What we've done though is we've basically built a Microsoft team to kind of demonstrate how you guys could use the Microsoft 365 platform to get the most out of helping people return to the workplace. So I've got here an example of a Microsoft team. We've created one and it's just basically called Return to Workplace. Now, as we scroll through the team, we've got an announcement in here just utilizing Teams where we've basically stated the original announcement where we're working from home. So it's a really quick place where we can put the announcement in. It can be integrated with things like SharePoint if you have an intranet, so we could drop these articles in automatically. But this was the first message that went out to let people that we'd know we'd start to work from home. As we start to scroll through here, we've also now got the return to the workplace. So we've put a post in here again where people can start to utilize Microsoft Teams, which is basically just outlining the return to the workplace, explaining some of the applications that we've got available, and we'll jump into those in a second. We also thought it'd be useful as part of that is we've got an Ask a Question channel. So basically people can start to drop in questions in here and the group of people can start to quickly respond. So as you can see, there's questions in there. Say, I'm currently shielding. Do I need to come back to the workplace? I've come back from holiday, and what office locations are open? So it's just really thinking about how can you use Microsoft Teams to help facilitate that return to the workplace, and things like using Teams as a ask a question and also having the general tab for announcements would be very useful. Also, perhaps consider using the wiki. So I've just put a basic example in here where I've got some wiki place questions. So if people are asking the same questions over and over, we could build that knowledge base and use the wiki then with all of the questions and the answers so people can self-help rather than immediately asking a question. Now, the templates that Microsoft have worked on, the very first one is called Return to the Workplace. So the idea of this application is it's been designed by Microsoft to help people provide 2 components. The first one is, do you feel safe returning to work? So what I can do is I can feed into this and I can put a response to say yes through neutral or no, and that will then feed into a report later on to show the sentiment of the company and how their current situation and how they feel about returning to the work. That can help the leaders in the organization make decisions around, is this something we should be doing, or are we going to annoy a lot of people who don't feel safe, and really drive the intelligent decisions around when's a good time to return to the workplace. Within the app itself then, we've got 2 options. The first one we have is called Get Day Pass. So the idea of this is if you are planning on returning to the workplace, we can basically look at a list of all of the workplaces that are configured. Obviously, with this being a Microsoft application, they've got ones for every country and region in here, but the idea is you can customize and add your own office locations in here. When we find an office location, we can jump into Las Vegas as an example, and you'll see here now that they're currently in phase 2. So behind this, Microsoft have built different phases. So phase 1 is kind of work from home. Phase 2 is an initial return where a subset of people can work. Phase 3 would be adding more people in, and so on and so forth until the final phase, which is everyone goes back to the office. So as you jump in between different offices, it gives you an idea of what the office situation is, whether it's in planning or whether we're in initial return and so on and so forth. So the user, as they're filling in this day pass, can immediately see the current status of the office. The next page then is a health survey. So it's basically doing a pre-screening for that employee before they go into the office. So ensuring that they're that obviously making it clear that the health and safety is important. But if I jump into here, there's a very simple statement. In the last 72 hours, I've had none of these symptoms. I've not been, and etc. And we can customize these in the template Microsoft's provided. They've just put very high level components. but we could deploy this and basically customize these for you guys. If they choose I agree, you'll see now they have a day pass that enables them to go to that office for the 25th, and there's a countdown timer on there. In the back end of this, that will also log into a database about how many people are on site. And the next application, which isn't currently available, will be providing more information about how many people are on site. And if it starts to hit a limit, so if there's perhaps only 20 people can go to this office, it will prevent that employee from being able to log in. At the moment, it's just facilitating a very basic, here's a pass and enabling you to go to the office. If we were to do a similar process and we were to put the answer as I disagree, it basically comes back to say you're better to stay at home rather than enter the workplace. So this is a very simple application that's used to basically enable employees to request a day pass and then determine whether the office location is currently open or shut. The next piece of this we have is something called a business unit report. So the idea of this is that the business units are able to come into this platform and they've got a number of different tabs available to them. So we've got a readiness checklist, which again, Microsoft have provided information on various pieces and whether they've been completed or not. These are all the checks and putting the right security measures in place so that when people are going to the office, it's a safe environment. And you can see here for this facility, we're at about 31%. Ideally, before everyone starts going back to the office, that would become 100%. And you can filter right down into different offices. So we can jump into Barcelona here and we can see that they've got some of those bits completed and they're at 25%. So the idea of this is it just gives the organization a checklist for each of their offices, which can be customized. And then it gives you a readiness of that office to make sure that it is safe to return to work. And as you see, as I jump through different ones, they've got different levels. If we go back to all of them, we can see that there's been one pass generated today. So this is just providing information for the company to see how many people are starting to do that return to work. If there's perhaps a very few passes that are being generated, that might indicate that people aren't ready to start going back to the workplace and you need to address some of those concerns. If there's a higher number, that means that perhaps the measures that you've put in place are working and people are happy to go from there. The average sentiment is fed from the application that I showed before. So when I'm on this return to work, I can put my sentiment straight on this page and I can say yes, neutral or no. And that feeds then back to a positive, neutral, or whatever else it may be. So as an example, if I was to go to another office in here, I could search for Las Vegas and I can see all of the sentiments if they've been populated for those offices. And it basically then, perhaps by region, you're able then to see what the sentiment is. If there is perhaps more COVID cases in one region, we may see that the sentiment is very unhappy and perhaps a bad time to start returning to the office. Perhaps if it's much higher, then it's a good time to return to the office. So it's literally just giving us that information. The next tab we've got is around virus spread. So this is taking information directly from Bing's COVID tracker, and it's basically giving us an idea of how many COVID cases there are in different regions. And again, you can filter that down to a region, and it helps then determine within that region how many cases there are. So it's just giving you the information to say COVID cases have decreased significantly, so it may be a good time to start that planning, or we're right in the peak of these cases and it's a really bad time to start trying to get people to come to the office. And you'll see as I jump into different offices, we've kind of got whether they're going up or down and how many total cases there are. And again, on this page, you can just jump into different reports of kind of how many COVID cases there are, how many fatalities, and that reproductive number, the R number that's been mentioned as well. So all that information is to hand to enable the business units to kind of decide what phase should we be in to that return to work. The final tab we've got in here is the employee activity tab. So effectively this is showing across, it's not showing the actual employee names, but it's showing the sentiment of different employees around the organization. And we can see that there's been a neutral sentiment and a positive sentiment. So it's kind of just to give us an overview of how many people are using that application, whether they're comfortable using that application, or whether there's any kind of issues and whether we're getting that negative sentiment to kind of maybe change the strategic decisions around it. The final one we've got is a leadership report. So this is very similar to the business unit report, but it's to give a much higher overview. So the system at a glance is showing across all the different facilities a visual way of representing near those facilities how many COVID cases there are. And I'm able to kind of hover over the regions and see the information and kind of filter in and see how many cases there are by those regions. So again, it's just giving the leadership a way of seeing an overall status of where their office locations are. And then down the bottom here, we can kind of see the different offices and the phases that they're in. So phase 0 is closed, which means they haven't made the return to work yet. There's a number of offices in the planning phase. We've got a number of offices in the initial return. A number of offices that are doing that scaling up, so the initial return's been successful. And then phase 4 is this, what Mark mentioned as the new normal, where it's likely to be a hybrid of working from the office and working from the home, but as back to normal as we could be in the current situation. And again, really similar information. We're able to jump in the facilities, so the leadership can kind of see, right, how many passes are being generated, where are those offices up to, and have they completed the checklist, what's the overall sentiment. And again, we can jump into different regions and see if that sentiment's different for different countries. All this information at the top will automatically change as we flick through the different areas. So as you can see, as we jumped into this region, the overall average sentiment is surprisingly positive, but yeah, that gives us that glance. And then finally, employee activity, which is just similar to the one I showed on the business units page. It just gives us that how many passes have been generated and what's the kind of employee sentiment. So those are the current applications that have been provided by Microsoft. There is one other application that's coming, and the idea of this application is it's going to be designed to help people manage the locations and their desks within those locations. So as you can see, the current one is about gearing offices up, providing those phases and providing a overall view of kind of what the cases are, what the sentiment of people returning to work are. And the final one will be providing an overall sort of view of the locations and the desks. So it'll provide more of a desk management solution as opposed to this one, which is just a high level. So those are the key applications that are available. I don't know whether, Mark, there's been any questions that are worth going through at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got a couple of questions at the moment. So one of them is, we don't have any Power App skills at the moment or at all. Are you able to deploy these applications on our behalf?
Yeah, so we're providing a fixed price deployment of these applications. So there'll be a 2-day charge for us to roll these out, train you guys up on them and hand them over to you, at which point you guys will then be fully able to look after and manage this application.
We do have a slide depicting this a little bit later on, but it's quite relevant. Are there any special licensing requirements to enable this?
So the license requirements would, firstly, you need a Power BI license, which is included in most of the Office 365 and Microsoft 365 plans. And all of the Power BI reports are driven using Power BI Pro. So you would also need a Power BI Pro for those users that would need those reports.
Okay. And in terms of the applications themselves, how does that work?
So Microsoft have developed these as templates, so there's no costs around the actual applications, and they're given as applications that can be tailored for your organization, so no costs there.
Fab. And in terms of those applications, we've had another one. Do we need to deploy an app to people's phones for this to work?
Yeah, so there is an application available, which is called Power Apps. So the actual app here, that's driven for the end users, where they're able to basically request a day pass and determine whether they're feeling safe. This is using Power Apps. So for this to work on people's phones, you would need to deploy an app called Power Apps. They would need to sign in with their Office 365 credentials, and then from there they're able to do this and request the different pieces.
Fab. Yeah, that's all we've got for the time being.
Okay, perfect. So alongside these templates that Microsoft have developed, we've also been looking at some of the other tools that have been created and some of the applications that we've been working on and customizing ourselves as well. So the first one of these is an onboarding application. So the idea of the onboarding application is, obviously in the current situation where people can potentially be in the office, people will be working from home, and some organizations who are just fully still working from home, they're going to have a very difficult time to onboard employees. So it's difficult to engage with them, set those inductions up, set those meetings up. So what Microsoft have developed, and we've then built on top of, is an onboarding application. So a very quick overview of the process to give you an idea of how this works. Effectively, the piece, and this is something that we've developed, is an employee details form. So the idea is this is a very simple onboarding employee details form, which looks like this. And it collects all the information of the new starter. So their name, their department, who their manager is. You'll see on this, I've got some policies about whether they've been read or not read. But effectively what happens is when we fill this in, it sends out 2 checklists. So if you go back to the process, the first one is, as soon as that employee details form's been filled in and populated, it will then go to an employee who can sign their contract. So that's done using your normal method. You may use DocuSign or a manual piece. And as soon as that contract's signed, you are able then to push a button, which then sends them to the pre-onboarding portal. So the idea of this is to provide the company a place where they can welcome new starters before they've actually joined the company, before day one, before they have an Office 365 account. This will invite them using their personal email account. And you'll see here it's kind of, hi, welcome to the company. Here's a message from our CEO. Here's our values. Here's how we balance work and life, our benefits. Here's some of the people that you're going to meet while you're there. And then kind of what it's like working at the organization and our Twitter feed. So the idea of this is from immediately before they've even started day one, they will feel part of the company. And we can then customize this portal to kind of say, right, well, here's about our company. Here's what you should do on day one. So orientating around the office. Here's how you can get help and support. So the idea of this is just to, before they've even started, they immediately feel part of the company and they've got that pre-onboarding portal. The next piece of this is then it sends out 2 checklists. So it sends an employer checklist, which will basically notify each department of the tasks they need to do. So for example, it can go to HR to enroll them in the HR system. It can notify IT to set them up in 365 and set their devices up. And once that's completed kind of in tandem on day one, when the employee starts in the organization, they will then have access to the onboarding portal. So very similar to the pre-onboarding portal, but much more focused about what you should be doing on your day one. So welcome to the company. Again, a bit more information about the company and the leadership team. We can kind of give an opportunities to kind of meet with people, set up your one-to-one, join different groups that are available. So it's just kind of helping that employee find the different pieces they should start on day one. Then we've kind of got all the stuff they need to do from a finance perspective, how they'd raise expenses, some training videos. So if you guys run regular training videos, they can all be uploaded. And again, more information about the organization. So it means that on day one, the employee's got an immediate portal, which is basically navigating them around the company's process and the different pieces that they're able to do. And when I jump into kind of start here, we've got kind of welcome to the company. If you need some help, here's the best people to contact with their picture and some of their information. And this new hire checklist. So this sends them a list of everything that they need to do, from setting up their profile, to read in video, to watch in videos, join in different groups. It's a full task list which you guys can customize so that every employee on day 1 through to the first month has a clear schedule of the things that they should be doing, and just streamlines that process. And the final piece of this is each department also has the opportunity to develop their own page as well. So if that person's joining the sales department, the sales onboarding page is then just helping orientate them around that team. So there's a meet the team section. There's a bit of the culture of the team as we scroll through what the mission of the team is. So again, it's just kind of welcome to the sales team. Here's all the team members. Here's kind of what you need to do. And it's kind of replacing that walking around the office and meeting people and setting up meetings. It's at least giving you something when people are working from home and in this hybrid environment, basically. So that's an example of the sales page, and an engineering page, which is very similar, where it's kind of go set your stuff up, here's the team members, that kind of information. So that is kind of the onboarding application. There's pieces of that Microsoft have built and developed, and then we've kind of molded our own application, which is about providing that checklist and that automated workflows and notifications. Microsoft basically built some portals which require customizing, and then we've built the automation around that to make sure people are getting emails like the employee reminders, and the departments are getting checklists of what they need to do. So is there any questions on that piece, Mark?
No, nothing on that one so far. That's all good.
Okay, perfect. And the final application really is one called an incentives application. So while not directly related to returning to the workplace, the idea of the incentives application, it's another Power App that's available within Microsoft Teams. And the idea of this application is to basically try and incentivize people for things above and beyond their normal day-to-day. So how this could relate to the returning back to the workplace is if I jump into the activities, you can see some of the activities we have in here are getting great customer feedback, writing a blog post, do an exam, but we could build in things about returning to the workplace into this as well. So perhaps first day back at the office, making a recommendation that improves the security of the environment. And you could start to build those activities using this application. And the idea is that they get points for these, and there's an overall leaderboard on the homepage that shows who's got the most points and that kind of thing. And finally, there's then a rewards section. So you can basically build in rewards that when they hit a certain number of points, they're then eligible to cash those points in and get a reward on the back of it. So another template that's available that could be customized and in a return to workplace context, perhaps thinking about activities that might encourage people to come back to the office and also encourage them to provide recommendations that would improve the overall security and health of going back to that. So that's another application that's available. And that's really kind of an overview of the toolkit that's available from Microsoft. We've got the clear return to work applications and templates that I've just been through. We've got the onboarding application, which can help with this onboarding in a hybrid world. And then we've got the incentives application, which can be used to really kind of drive activities and rewards that might encourage people back to this way of working. So I'll hand over back to Mark, who'll now go through a bit more through the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. I'm hoping that the attendees today can kind of see the benefit of these applications. And whilst the demonstration does cover kind of global organizations, there's still a real world utilization for them within smaller organizations, and how that could affect and help you manage what that effectively looks like. So in terms of, just present this again. In terms of those applications, to summarize, let's get to that. To summarize what they are, so we've got the location readiness, workplace care management, and then the employee health and safety management, with the location management coming soon, which you referenced specifically around desk spaces and things like that. This is a complete toolkit essentially to help you manage that return to the workplace environment. At the moment, you may be doing that via Excel or something else, and being able to report on that it might be quite difficult, or there may not be any tool sets that you've got in place to be able to do that. And one of the key benefits of a solution like this, from what we've seen so far, is that the adoption of Teams throughout this situation to enable people working from home has been phenomenal. And to have applications like this be readily integrated into Microsoft Teams so that there's a single place for the employees and employers to use to manage the return to the workplace and see how everybody's getting on with it, and for that interactive piece to occur throughout all of their working day, really does change the dynamic of how these types of applications get integrated into that environment. So in terms of what we can deliver for this, as Hugh mentioned earlier, there's typically a 2-day engagement in order to get these set up and deployed. And the majority of instances, these licenses are for the Power BI specifically are included as part of your license type, with the addition of Power BI Pro required for some of the dashboards in there. So it's quite an easy win, shall we say, to get this deployed and set up across your organization. So if you are interested in speaking to us about this, please get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to help out with that deployment. In addition to that, we also have additional workshops that are available. So if you wanted to discuss Power Apps or any of the other services that we can offer on this slide, then please get in touch with us. We deliver these remotely, given the current situation, which enables you to kind of record the session or have a little bit more of an interactive session with various different attendees. We're more than happy to cover that off and go through any topic that you feel relevant. We've included some useful links on this as well, purely because we've done an awful lot of webinars around helping people during this scenario. I'm tired of using that phrase now, but I've yet to find a better way of phrasing it, really. But between ourselves and Valto, we've done an awful lot of different videos to try and help people return to the workplace, to utilize different tool sets within the Office 365 environment, how Power Apps can automate processes and digitize paper-based forms and things like that. So if you are interested in any of those, please use these links to understand what capabilities are there for you. And in addition to that as well, we've also included the 365 roadmap. There's constant changes happening within this ecosystem. So please read up on that and understand what effects it will have on your environment. So on that, we want to turn over to any questions that people may have. So I'm just going to pause that a second and jump back into Teams. Has there been any additional questions?
So there's just a question about, does the onboarding application have any specific licensing? So again, that's all built using Office 365. So there's no licensing requirements at all. Well, apart from having an Office 365 on Microsoft 365 license, there's nothing special required at all. And then our add-on, which wraps all of the checklists and the automation, is charged at a fixed fee on the back of that as well.
Thanks, you. So I think in terms of...
Go on, sorry.
Go on.
There was another question just asking if it would be recorded and the video would be available at the end as well. So that'll be available on our YouTube channels as well after this.
Yeah, we'll send out a mail shot post this with all the relevant links and information as well, so you've got that easily available for you. So on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance today. If there is anything that you need help with on this, then please feel free to email us and go to our websites for contact details. I'd be more than happy to discuss any of your future requirements with you.
Great.